My wife said I wasn't ambitious enough after I paid her law school tuition, so I left a goodbye note on her degree frame and walked away for good. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and I used to believe that marriage was about building something together. You know, being each other's biggest supporter, pushing through the hard times side by side. That belief shaped everything I did, especially when I met Allison. She was the kind of woman who filled every room she walked into. Sharp, confident, with this almost magnetic energy that made you want to keep up with her. I fell for her ambition as much as her smile. She talked about wanting to be a lawyer who actually changed things. And I remember thinking, I want to be the man who helps her get there. Back then, I wasn't earning much. I took on extra shifts at the tech support center, sometimes even working weekends just so we could afford her tuition and rent. Allison always said she'd make it up to me one day, but honestly, I never cared about keeping score. I told her, "It's not your dream, Allison. It's our dream." And I meant it. Watching her study late into the night while I packed her lunches or fixed our busted coffee maker made me feel proud, like I was investing in something greater than myself. We used to talk about the future like it was this golden horizon waiting for us. "When I'm a lawyer and you start your own business, we'll finally breathe," she'd say, half asleep on my shoulder. I believed her, every word, every promise. Even when my friends joked that I was playing house husband or bankrolling her career, I brushed it off. They didn't get it. Love isn't about who earns what. It's about believing in each other. But looking back now, I realize I was building a partnership with someone who only saw a stepping stone. And I had no idea how far she was willing to climb, even if it meant stepping right over me. Those next few years blurred into one long cycle of exhaustion and hope. I'd wake up before sunrise, grab instant coffee, and head to the construction site. After my shift, I'd spend nights fixing old computers or taking freelance IT jobs to scrape together a few extra bucks. Allison barely noticed how drained I was. She was buried in case briefs, study groups, and exam prep. She always said, "This is just temporary. Once I'm done with law school, we'll finally live." That word, "we," kept me going. Our apartment was tiny, but I tried to make it feel like a home. I cooked when I could, handled bills, even learned to patch up plumbing leaks from YouTube videos. Meanwhile, Allison spent most evenings in the library or at networking events. I didn't mind. I told myself she was doing it for us. Every time she came home tired but smiling, I'd kiss her forehead and say, "I'm proud of you." She'd nod, distracted, already scrolling through her notes again. Money was tight. I remember pawning my guitar, the one I'd had since high school, just to pay her bar exam registration fee. When she found out, she hugged me and whispered, "You're my rock." And in that moment, it felt worth it. Every sacrifice. Every sleepless night. But somewhere along the way, I noticed small changes. She stopped saying "we" and started saying "I." Her texts became shorter. Her tone, sharper. I'd ask how her day went, and she'd say, "Stressful. You wouldn't understand." It stung, but I brushed it off. I told myself it was just law school pressure, that once she graduated, we'd finally breathe again. Didn't realize I was watching the slow death of our partnership. Disguised as her success story, Allison's. Graduation day was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of our lives. I'd spent the night before ironing her gown, making sure her cap was spotless. I even bought a small bouquet of white lilies, her favorite. When her name was called, I stood up and clapped until my hands stung. Watching her walk across that stage, diploma in hand, I felt this deep, quiet pride. Every extra shift, every meal skipped, every late-night worry, it all felt justified. But during her speech, something cracked. She stood at the podium, voice confident and polished, thanking her mentors, her classmates, and her firm for believing in her potential. I waited for my name, for even a passing mention. Nothing. Not a word about the man who worked himself raw so she could stand there. I smiled for the photos, but inside I felt something heavy twist in my chest. Afterward, we went to a celebration dinner with her classmates. They all wore expensive watches and talked about internships, travel plans, and making six figures before 30. I tried to fit in, but Allison barely looked at me. When someone asked what I did, she chuckled lightly and said, "He's in tech support, the stable one." Everyone laughed politely, and she didn't even notice how small that made me feel. That night, while she slept, surrounded by her graduation flowers, I sat in the living room, staring at the bills stacked on the coffee table. It hit me that I'd sacrificed years to help her reach a place where she no longer saw me as an equal. Still, I convinced myself it was just the excitement of success, that things would settle once real life began. But real life was coming, and it had no intention of being kind. Allison's new job at the firm changed everything. Not just her schedule, but the way she looked at me. She started coming home later, her tone clipped, her eyes always on her phone. She'd toss her blazer over a chair, pour herself a glass of wine, and scroll through emails like I wasn't even there. When I asked about her day, she'd sigh, "You wouldn't get it. It's corporate politics." That phrase, "you wouldn't get it," became her new favorite weapon. At first, I brushed it off. She was under pressure, adapting to a demanding job. But it didn't stop there. At dinner parties with her new coworkers, she started turning me into a punchline. "He's the practical one," she'd say with a smirk. "Not everyone can handle ambition like I do." Everyone laughed, and I did too, out of reflex. But inside, my stomach twisted. I'd built her foundation, and now she was standing on it to feel taller. One night, I finally said, "Do you realize how belittling that sounds?" She didn't even look up from her laptop. "You're too sensitive," she muttered. "It's just a joke." I wanted to argue, but what's the point when someone stops hearing you? Still, I tried to fix things. I planned a weekend getaway. Just the two of us, no work, no distractions. When I told her, she laughed softly. "I can't just drop everything for some cabin in the woods. This is my career, not a hobby." That sentence stuck with me all night. This is my career, not a hobby. It was the first time I realized she didn't see us as a partnership anymore. I was the man who once lifted her up, now reduced to background noise in her success story. And yet, I still wasn't ready to believe I was losing her. It started with small comments. Subtle, almost harmless at first. "You know, David's husband just started his own business," she'd mention while scrolling through her phone. Or, "Mara's boyfriend just got promoted to senior consultant. Isn't that great?" At first, I nodded along, pretending it didn't sting. But after weeks of these little jabs, it was impossible to ignore what she was really saying. Why can't you be more like them? One night, as I was fixing a leaky pipe under the kitchen sink, Allison leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're smart, but you don't think big enough," she said, her tone casual, like she was offering advice. "You could do more if you wanted to." I stayed quiet, hands wet, heart pounding. After a pause, I asked, "Do you mean more for me, or more for you?" She blinked, then shrugged. "Both, I guess," I reminded her gently that I'd worked extra years so she could finish law school debt-free, that I was already doing everything for our future. She didn't argue. She just turned away and muttered, "You still could have done more." That night, lying in bed beside her, I couldn't stop replaying those words. You still could have done more. What does that even mean when you've given everything? Soon, the comparisons became bolder. She'd mention colleagues' spouses, their cars, their suits, their goals. I started eating dinner alone because I couldn't stand the quiet judgment anymore. The woman I'd once seen as my partner now looked at me like a project she'd outgrown. But instead of anger, I felt guilt, like I'd somehow failed her. I started working longer hours, picking up extra side jobs again. Not because we needed the money, but because I was desperate to prove I was still enough. I didn't realize I was feeding a fire that had already burned down our marriage. It was a mutual friend who first mentioned it. In that hesitant, almost apologetic tone people use when they're about to shatter your peace. We were grabbing coffee when she said, "Hey, I don't want to stir anything, but I saw Allison last week. She wasn't alone." I laughed it off at first, the kind of laugh that hides fear. "She probably had a meeting," I said quickly, but my friend's eyes softened. It was late, like really late. That night, I asked Allison how her networking dinner went. She barely looked up from her phone. Fine. You wouldn't know anyone there. Then she turned away. Something about the way she said it. Flat, cold, set off alarm bells I couldn't silence. A few days later, I found the receipt. A dinner for two at a 5-star restaurant. The kind of place we'd never gone to, because she'd always said it was too expensive. The timestamp matched the night of her so-called work event. My hands trembled as I held it. I wanted to believe it meant nothing. Maybe a client meeting, maybe a colleague. But deep down, something inside me cracked open. I started watching her more closely. Her late-night texts, the sudden silences when I walked into a room, the perfume she never wore before. I wasn't trying to catch her. I was trying to save what was left of us. One night, as she got ready for another firm dinner, I asked, "Who are you going with?" She shot me a glare so sharp it felt like a slap. "You don't trust me now?" Her tone wasn't hurt. It was defensive, like I'd caught her in a lie she wasn't ready to admit. I smiled weakly and said, "I just want to know when you'll be home." She didn't answer. She just walked out, heels clicking like a countdown, and in that silence I knew something had shifted that could never be undone. The weeks that followed felt like living with a stranger. Allison moved through our home like a ghost with an agenda. Polite smiles, quick answers, no warmth. The woman who once kissed me goodnight now slept with her back turned, her phone clutched like a secret. I tried to confront her gently at first, asking if something was wrong. "You're imagining things," she said, eyes on the mirror as she fixed her makeup. "I'm just busy, that's all." Busy. That word became the wall between us. I stopped sleeping properly. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Was it my job? My clothes? My lack of a title? The woman I'd sacrificed for now looked at me like I was holding her back. One night, while I was sitting on the couch surrounded by unopened bills, she came home past midnight, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. When I asked how her evening went, she sighed and said, "You wouldn't understand. I'm in a different place now." I stared at her, my throat dry. "A different place? We built this life together," she scoffed. "You didn't build anything, you just helped." That word, helped, shattered something inside me. Years of sacrifice reduced to an afterthought. I felt anger rise, hot and sharp, but all I managed to say was, "I worked for you, for us." She didn't even look at me. "That was your choice," she said simply. She went to bed, and I sat there for hours, surrounded by the hum of the fridge and the weight of everything I'd ignored. That night, I realized I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her past, a reminder of the struggle she wanted to forget, and somehow, knowing that hurt more than any confession of betrayal ever could. It happened on a Thursday night, the kind of quiet evening that starts ordinary and ends up carving itself into your memory forever. I'd finished an extra shift and decided to surprise Allison with her favorite takeout. Maybe it was naive, but some part of me still believed there was a way back, that if I just reminded her who we used to be, she might soften. When I opened the door, the apartment was dark except for the faint glow from her office. I heard laughter, not the polite kind she used in public, but the soft, familiar kind she used to share with me. My heart started racing. I moved closer, my shoes barely making a sound on the carpet. She was on a video call. The man's voice was deep, smooth. The same senior partner from her firm I'd heard stories about. "You looked incredible tonight," he said. She smiled, twirling a strand of her hair. "Well, you bring out my best side." My chest tightened. I stood there, frozen, takeout bag in hand, as the woman I'd loved for years flirted openly in our home. He said, "So, about that weekend in Chicago," and she laughed. That same bright laugh I hadn't heard in months. I didn't burst in. I didn't shout. I just turned around, stepped outside, and sat in my car. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. Quietly. Shamefully. Because it wasn't just her betrayal that broke me. It was realizing how long I'd been denying the truth. I stared at the dashboard until the streetlights blurred. Then I whispered to myself, "She's gone." and in that moment something inside me shut off completely. Not from rage, but from finality. The kind of silence that comes when you finally accepted that love is dead. The next morning, I woke up numb. Not angry, not heartbroken, just empty. There's a strange peace that comes after you've been broken enough times. Like your mind finally stops trying to fight what's already over. Allison acted like nothing had happened. She brewed her coffee, scrolled through her phone, and told me she'd be working late again. I just nodded, pretending I believed her. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't the desperate husband anymore. I was a man quietly planning his exit. For the next few days, I moved like a ghost through our home. While she was out, I started organizing my things, my tools, my laptop, my few sentimental keepsakes. I found old photos of us in a drawer. Smiling faces, love notes, tiny reminders of what I thought we had. I packed them away carefully, not out of nostalgia, but closure. Each box I sealed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I began reviewing our finances. I'd been the one managing bills for years, so I knew exactly where our money went, including the thousands I'd poured into her education. I opened a private account and transferred what little I had left. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One evening, she mentioned a weekend trip with her colleagues. I smiled, played along, even helped her pack. "You're being so understanding lately," she said, almost suspicious. I just replied, "I've learned to pick my battles." That night after she left, I stood in the middle of our apartment, the home we'd built together, and let the silence wash over me. There was no shouting, no chaos, just calm determination. I wasn't going to confront her anymore. I was going to disappear and make sure my absence was louder than any argument could ever be. When Sunday came, the apartment was still and quiet, almost too quiet. Allison wouldn't be home until late that night, and I knew this was it. My last day here, my last day pretending. I walked through every room slowly, taking one final look at the life I'd built around her. The couch where we once watched movies, the kitchen I'd cooked in while she studied, the desk where I used to leave her coffee before exams. Every corner held pieces of me she'd already forgotten. I cleaned up everything. Washed the dishes, took out the trash, even folded the blanket she always left on the sofa. I didn't want her to come home to chaos. I wanted her to come home to emptiness. Then I stood before the one thing that defined our story, her framed law degree. The degree I'd worked endless hours to help her earn. I ran my fingers along the edge of the frame, feeling that cold glass beneath my skin. It used to symbolize everything we'd achieved together. Now it only reminded me what I'd lost. I pulled out a small piece of paper and a pen. I didn't write a letter. I wrote a statement, short, final. It said, "This is your degree, but it was built with my years. I hope your ambition keeps you warm." I taped it to the bottom corner of the frame, right where she'd have to see it every day. Then I placed my keys on the counter next to her half-empty bottle of wine and took one last deep breath. When I stepped out of that door, I didn't look back. The hallway felt brighter, lighter, like I'd been carrying a mountain on my back for years and finally set it down. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't her support system. I was free. I didn't hear from Allison for 3 days. Not a call, not a text, nothing. I guess she thought I'd come crawling back, the same way I always did after our fights. But this time, I was done being the safety net she kicked when she needed stability. I stayed with my friend Mark for a while, sleeping on his couch and trying to rebuild some version of a normal routine. For the first time in years, I woke up without checking her schedule first. It felt strange, but peaceful. On the 4th day, my phone finally buzzed. It was a message from her. "You're being ridiculous. We need to talk." No apology. No remorse. Just control disguised as concern. I didn't reply. An hour later, another text came. "You think walking out makes you noble? It makes you weak." That one made me laugh. The bitter kind of laugh that comes from realizing someone truly never valued you. A few mutual friends reached out saying she was furious. Apparently, she'd told people I'd abandoned her out of jealousy. But others, the ones who actually knew us, started whispering about how much I'd sacrificed for her. Word spread fast. The woman who loved looking perfect in public suddenly had to explain why her husband left without a word. I found a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, cracked walls, old carpet, but it was mine. My space, my peace. I started taking freelance contracts again, not because I needed the distraction, but because it felt good to earn something that was just for me. Every day, I felt pieces of myself returning. The quiet felt different now. Not lonely, but honest. And for the first time in years, I wasn't living in her shadow. I was finally standing in my own light. 6 months later, I barely recognized my life, and I mean that in the best way. The silence that once felt suffocating had turned into clarity. I'd grown my small freelance work into a full-time consulting business, helping small startups manage their systems. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Each project, each client, each dollar earned was a reminder that I'd finally started building for myself, not for someone else's dream. Then one afternoon, while attending a local business expo, I saw her, Allison, standing near a booth for her firm, dressed in the same tailored confidence I once admired. For a second, I felt that old ache in my chest, the muscle memory of love. But then she noticed me. Her expression flickered between surprise and discomfort before settling into polite composure. "Wow," she said, smiling tightly. "You look good, thanks," I replied. "So do you." There was an awkward pause before she added, "I heard you're consulting now. Must be different." I smiled, calm and grounded. "It's better. I actually sleep now." She laughed softly, but there was a crack in her tone, that subtle tremor of someone realizing they no longer have power over you. For a brief moment, I saw regret in her eyes, like she'd just registered everything she threw away. But I didn't need her apology. Before she could say more, I just nodded. "Take care, Allison." And I walked away, not with bitterness, but with peace. That night, sitting in my apartment with the city lights flickering outside, I looked around at the simplicity of my new life and smiled. I didn't have luxury, but I had dignity. Freedom. Allison once said I wasn't ambitious enough. Maybe she was right. I wasn't ambitious for status. I was ambitious for peace. And that's something her world would never understand.